Okay, so in this section, we're going to go over exactly what the D7 visa requirements are and how to lodge your application. So you're going to need to lodge your application in your home country. And if you're living in the United States, you have to lodge your application at the embassy or the consulate that's closest to where you're living. At the time I made my application, I was living in Georgia. So the closest consulate to me was in Washington, D.C. Now the turnaround time for the visa is usually 60 days. It can be less, and a lot of that depends on the embassy or the consulate that you're applying with. I've heard stories of people who are applying through the consulate out in San Francisco, and they got their visa back in 14 days. Mine took exactly 60 days. So I'm going to link a list of the embassies and the consulates in the United States, and I'm going to put that in the files section of this section of the course, so you're going to have access to that. But right now, I want to go over exactly what's required. I'm also going to include a checklist, so don't worry, you don't need to take notes on that. I'm going to include that as a PDF in this section of the course. But I want to go over exactly what's included and exactly how you have to meet each requirement for the visa. So let's get started on that. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to lodge your application for a visa to the Schengen zone. And I'm going to link that application here. I'm also going to link that application below in the files section of this section of the course. This application that you're going to include in the package that you're sending to the consulate needs to be signed in the presence of a notary. That's really important. Also, you're going to need to include proof of funds. As we mentioned earlier, the D7 is an economic independence visa, so you're going to need to prove that you're economically independent. You can show your Social Security income, you can show pension from a job that you've left, you can show annuitized distributions from a 401k, you can show rental income. You essentially need to show that you're economically independent. You're not going to Portugal to live off of the Portuguese government and the Portuguese people. What you cannot do is show income from freelancing. There's a separate visa that you need to apply for. It's a D2 visa for entrepreneurs if you're choosing to apply as an entrepreneur. So freelancing income is not going to be sufficient. You're also going to need to show proof of assets. Now, that's different than your income. That's the money that you have in the bank. And that can be savings in a demand deposit. It can be a stock portfolio. I believe I sent in the cash value of a life insurance policy as proof of funds. Something that shows that you have assets behind you. But the exact amount when I applied wasn't made clear to me. I was told that $15,000 US would be more than sufficient. I sent him one account with the requisite amount, $15,000, and I had no issues getting my visa approved. Having said that, I have a friend who went through this course and she applied and she had far less than $15,000 and her visa was approved. So it all comes down to the decision of the consulate. I think if the more you can show, of course, the better off you are, but 15,000 is more than sufficient. Along with your proof of income and your proof of funds, you're going to need to submit a copy of your Portuguese tax number. That's your NIF number, NIF. And in section 2 of the course, I'm going to go over exactly how you can do that. And I'm also going to list some resources for people who can help you in getting your NIF number. You're also going to need to include proof of health insurance. Now, Portugal has universal health care, and as a temporary resident, you are eligible for coverage under the national system. However, the visa that you're granted to enter the country is only valid for 120 days. When you're in the country, it's then that you have your interview with immigration and you're issued your temporary residence permit, and then you're eligible to be covered by the public healthcare system. Until then, you're going to need private insurance. Portuguese private insurance is very affordable. You can get it from outside the country. You do need to have your NIF number to do so, but I'm going to cover more of that in the section on healthcare. If you choose, you can apply with travel insurance. Speak to the consulate and see what they require. Some consulates ask for things that are slightly different. I applied with travel insurance and I had no issues at all. I used Square Mouth, which was incredibly affordable. you needed to show 120 days of coverage. And I think for me, that cost me about $75 for 120 days. So it was excellent for me. Shop around and see what works for you. World Nomads is another company that I know offers very affordable travel insurance. Bear in mind that the consulate may ask you to sign a statement indicating that you promise to get Portuguese insurance when you arrive in Portugal. So your travel insurance will get you the visa application, but they'll ask that you also apply for Portuguese private insurance when you arrive. You will also need a Portuguese criminal record check. This is not anything that you have to do on your own. It's simply signing a form authorizing the Portuguese government to perform a criminal record check. You're also going to need to issue an FBI background check if you're coming from the United States. So this is a little bit more involved, and it requires you to go to a local law enforcement authority and get fingerprinted and then submit that to the FBI. The FBI will then send you back your copy of that record check indicating that you have a clean record, hopefully, and you submit a copy of that in your visa application. I'm going to include a PDF form in the files of this section that's going to outline exactly how you do that. Now, one of the most difficult parts of the application process for the D7 is the proof of accommodation. You need to show that you have a place to live while you're here in Portugal. What they ask for is either proof that you own a home or a lease indicating that you've rented a home. And you also need to include receipts for the months that you've paid. Now, obviously, for many people who haven't been to Portugal, this presents a problem. In the past, people had simply used Airbnb. However, consulates are becoming a bit more picky, and they're starting to refuse Airbnb as an acceptable proof of accommodation. So definitely contact the consulate that you're applying through and let them know. Let them know what you plan to do. Every consulate's a little bit different. I have 2 friends who applied about 18 months ago, and they used an Airbnb down in the Algarve, and their application was approved with no issues at all. I have another friend who applied with a similar vacation rental contract, and she had no issues at all. So contact the consulate and see what they're going to require of you. For me, I purchased my home, so I just needed to show title to my house. If you're purchasing a home and that's what you're going to use for proof of accommodation, then you just do the same. You show the title and show that you have clear ownership of the home. If not, you're going to need to produce a rental contract. So make sure you check with the embassy and see what's required. I do think it's a good idea to do a scouting trip, visit Portugal beforehand, and think about where you want to be. Think about where you want to live. And if you are renting, maybe it's only 6 months, maybe it's only a year, but pick a place where you feel comfortable basing yourself out of, and it's going to be a good spot for you to explore the country and see where you want to base yourself permanently. Okay, so finally, you're going to need to include a copy of your passport, not your original passport. You keep that until your visa is approved. When your visa is approved, you'll send that in, but you're going to need to include a copy of the photo page, and you're going to need to include copies of every page that has a stamp on it. You're also going to need to include 3 passport-sized photos, and you're going to need to include a statement of purpose. Now, I was really a bit nervous when I found out I had to write a statement of purpose about immigrating to Portugal. I thought, gosh, what's going to be an acceptable reason? I need to include 3 reasons as to why I want to immigrate there. And in all honesty, the reasons are as diverse as the applicants. There's really no right or wrong answer here. For example, you might say, I want to explore the beautiful country. I want to learn Portuguese. You might say, Portugal offers an affordable cost of living. You might love the beach, you might love surfing, and you want to move to Portugal because they've got some of the greatest beaches in the world. You might want to go and visit the mountains in the interior. You might want to do Portuguese wine tasting, or you might be very interested in all the different types of seafood that Portugal has. So The reasons are really limitless. So, certainly think about what best suits you and what represents you and your interest in moving to Portugal. And that's what we're going to do for the activity for this first section of the course. I'm going to ask you to draft your letter of intent or your statement of purpose for moving to Portugal. So let's get started with that.